The U.S.-Mexico border stretches across a vast landscape, but it's far more than just a line on a map. For generations, it has served as a gateway for hope in hardship, an enduring corridor where people continually cross in search of opportunity or escape from struggle. This boundary, forged by treaties long past, now stands as a symbol of the complex mix of history, economics, and policy gaps that keeps its flows alive. By examining how this frontier was drawn and how its pressures evolved, we can begin to understand why, despite countless efforts, its migration story never truly ends. But why is this part of the world the way it is? Why do we so frequently hear about asylum seekers and cross-border deaths in this region? Well, the answer to these questions are deeply interconnected and multifaceted. Global economic disparities, political instability, and violence in countries like Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador drive many individuals and families to seek refuge in the United States. This relentless pursuit of safety and stability often leads to perilous journeys across an unforgiving landscape, where tragically, cross-border deaths have become all too common. Furthermore, the geopolitical history of the U.S.-Mexico border plays a significant role in this ongoing crisis. The border was solidified through various treaties, which disproportionately favored U.S. interests and left legacies of economic imbalance and dislocation in Mexico and Central America. And this history continues to resonate today, as economic opportunities tend to be far more accessible in the United States compared to its southern neighbors, leading to a constant stream of migrants seeking a better life. To put it rather bluntly, no matter who's in charge today or in the future, you will probably hear about this situation for the rest of your life, because the underlying causes are, unfortunately, very difficult to address. So let's try to assess the current situation the best we can. We must first turn back the clock a little less than 200 years ago and explore the root causes. Mexico is often celebrated for its sprawling landscapes, diverse ecosystems, and vibrant cultures. However, this rich country once extended far beyond its current borders. At its peak, Mexico encompassed a vast territory that spanned much of what we now consider the southwest United States. A significant turning point in this territorial history occurred in 1848 with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which marked the end of the war between the United States and Mexico. This pivotal agreement drastically redefined the map of North America, allowing the United States to acquire nearly half of Mexico's territory. As a result, the U.S. gained several crucial regions, including California, Arizona, and New Mexico. This treaty also included parts of modern-day Texas, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. Such a large territorial expansion not only reshaped the geography of the region, but also profoundly influenced the cultural and political landscape of both Mexico and the United States. The loss of these territories altered Mexico's borders and identity, while simultaneously shaping the future of the United States as it expanded westward, establishing its presence and identity in the evolving landscape of North America for generations to come. However, this shift was not guided by the interests of local people. Instead, it was driven by the idea of expanding U.S. power and land. The new borderline sliced through communities that had long shared language, faith, and trade. People woke up to find that they were now considered foreigners in lands where their families had lived for generations. Imagine being a farmer whose land suddenly fell on the U.S. side of the line, while your brother's field remained in Mexico. Or a merchant who sold goods across what was once a simple path, now turned into an international boundary. Homes, farms, markets, and towns were now split apart. This division ignored local ties, cultures, and economic bonds that had grown strong over centuries. Overnight, a single border created winners, losers, and a deep sense of loss that would ripple across time. Such an event is not unique to North America. In other parts of the world, like the Middle East, foreign powers also drew lines on maps without asking the people who lived there. These new borders often forced groups with different histories or beliefs to live together, or tore apart communities that once felt whole. For example, one of the most well-known and enduring conflicts in the Middle East is that between Israel and Palestine, a struggle that originates from the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 and the subsequent displacement of Palestinian Arabs. The borders established through the United Nations Partition Plan and further changes during the 1967 Six-Day War have led to ongoing disputes over territory, refugees, and the recognition of statehood. In both places, outside decisions shaped entire regions and set the stage for tensions that would last for decades, or even centuries. The U.S.-Mexico border is one example of how a line, drawn far away from everyday life, can affect the future of millions. This unfair start planted a seed of resentment and confusion. People who once moved freely to visit relatives, sell goods, or follow seasonal work patterns suddenly faced barriers. The new border made it harder for them to continue their old ways of life. Some decided to cross anyway, keeping family ties alive despite the risk. Others crossed to recover lost property or to find new opportunities since the border had changed where wealth and jobs could be found. Over time, what began as a line on a map grew into something far more powerful. The early injustice of the border's creation helped shape the cycle of migration that we see today. Each crossing, each effort to reach family on the other side, or each attempt to find better economic footing can be traced back to that first great shift. The border was never simply about geography. It was about people, their homes, and their livelihoods. From the moment the ink dried on the treaty, a lasting wound opened. It did not heal simply because the years passed. Instead, it set the tone for what would follow. The U.S. gained land, but it also inherited the responsibility of dealing with people who never asked to be part of this new world. Many found themselves separated from what they knew, while others faced new rules they did not understand. As we move forward, let's see how these early scars still shape the border's ongoing story. In the early 1900s, the economies of the United States and Mexico were already linked through the movement of workers. Mexican laborers often crossed the border seasonally to work in the fields and on railroads. Their labor was cheap, and for U.S. businesses, it was easy to hire them when needed. This arrangement, while informal, set the stage for more structured programs later on. During World War II, the U.S. faced a shortage of workers because many young Americans were fighting overseas. To fill the gap, the U.S. and Mexican governments created the Bracero program in 1942. Under this agreement, millions of Mexican workers were recruited to work on U.S. farms and railroads. The plan promised basic protections and fair pay, though in reality, conditions often fell short. Still, the program lasted more than 2 decades and played a huge part in building the U.S. economy, especially in agriculture. When the Bracero program ended in 1964, the demand for Mexican labor did not vanish. U.S. farms and other businesses still needed workers willing to do hard jobs at low wages. But now, there were fewer legal channels for them to come north. As a result, many laborers continued to cross the border without proper documents. What had once been a legal flow of workers turned into a large-scale pattern of unauthorized migration. This shift revealed a deep truth. The U.S. economy relied on Mexican workers, and Mexico had a workforce eager to earn higher wages abroad. On one side, jobs were available. On the other, people needed income. Even without formal agreements, the pull of U.S. opportunities and the push of limited prospects in Mexico fueled ongoing migration. This economic bond did not weaken over time. It simply adapted to new laws and barriers. When official programs vanished, people found other ways to cross. Their presence filled critical gaps in the U.S. labor market, and their remittance money sent back home supported families and communities in Mexico. The legacy of these early labor ties lives on. The system that began as a formal agreement turned into a cycle driven by economic need. The end of the Bracero program marked only a change in how workers crossed the border, not whether they would continue to come. Over the years, this back-and-forth movement became a key part of life along the U.S.-Mexico line, shaping its role as a corridor for opportunity-seeking migrants. One of the most powerful forces driving migration across the U.S.-Mexico border is the simple fact that life can be very hard in many parts of Mexico. In rural areas, poverty is widespread. Jobs are scarce, the land often yields too little, and modern infrastructure is lacking. Without good roads, schools, or clinics, families struggle to break free from a cycle of low earnings and limited chances. Young people may face a choice: stay and remain poor, or try their luck elsewhere. Often, that elsewhere means heading north. where at least there is hope of a better wage. Another key factor is the way global trade and policy choices have shaped the lives of Mexican farmers. In the mid-1990s, the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, changed how U.S., Mexico, and Canada did business. While it promised more opportunities and growth, it also hit small Mexican farmers hard. Cheap, subsidized crops from the United States flowed into Mexico, outpricing local products. Farmers who once could rely on selling their corn or other crops found they could not compete with U.S. agribusiness. This meant less income, and many rural families saw no future in the fields they had tended for generations. With few options at home, heading north to work in U.S. fields or factories seemed like the most realistic path to earning a decent living. On the other side of the border, U.S. industries have long depended on low-cost labor. Agriculture, construction, hospitality, food processing, and many service industries all rely on workers who are willing to do tough, physical jobs at wages that are low by U.S. standards, but still higher than what many could earn back home in Mexico. This means there is a strong pull drawing migrants across the border. For decades, U.S. employers have found willing workers just beyond the southern boundary, and no matter how policies change, that demand remains. Attempts to stop migration through heavy enforcement have not erased this basic market demand. Even as more fences are built, more patrols are added, and more technology is used, the need for low-cost labor in the U.S. does not go away. Employers and migrants find new routes, new methods, or new timing. The flow might slow or shift, but it does not vanish. Instead, both sides adapt. Smugglers find new paths, employers turn a blind eye or find indirect ways to hire, and migrants take greater risks. The pull factor is strong because the U.S. economy, at its core, benefits from having workers who are willing to accept jobs that many U.S.-born workers do not want. Yet the story is not only about money and jobs. Cultural and family ties stretch across the border, built over centuries of shared history. Before the line was drawn, people in the borderlands mixed freely. They traded goods, married, and built communities that did not see the region as two different countries, but as one shared space. Even after the border became a formal line, these connections remained. Many migrants have relatives in the U.S., uncles, cousins, and siblings who can help them find work, offer a place to stay, or guide them through the first confusing weeks in a new land. Such support makes the journey easier and encourages more people to try. Cultural bonds, shared languages, and common traditions also help people adjust more quickly once they arrive. Think of this dynamic as a constant engine running in the background. On the Mexican side, poverty, low wages, and a lack of good jobs push people to look north. On the U.S. side, steady demand for cheap labor pulls them in. Add in the cultural ties, and you have a system where one generation after another attempts the journey. Children grow up knowing aunts and uncles who left, cousins who send money home, and neighbors who returned with savings. These stories spread, and they reinforce the idea that crossing the border, though risky, might be the best chance at a better life. This pattern of push and pull does not appear only here. In other parts of the world, deep-rooted inequalities drive conflicts and forced migration. For example, in the Middle East, control over valuable resources such as oil and water has led to wars and mass movements of people. While the details differ, the core idea is the same. When some places cannot offer a decent living and others can, people will move. When barriers are built without solving the basic issues at the root, the movement continues through other means. No simple policy has managed to fix these inequalities. Building more walls or passing stricter laws may slow the flow for a time, but as long as the economic differences remain large, and as long as family and friends are waiting on the other side, people will keep trying. Improved border security alone does not create good jobs in rural Mexico, nor does it give farmers back their lost markets. In fact, many would argue that job options are becoming less and less. For example, in June 2024, the Mexican labor market eliminated 863,862 jobs, and with it erased job creation for the rest of the year. So it's easy to see why people keep flocking to the U.S. But on the other side of the fence, this does not remove the basic desire for U.S. employers to exploit the situation and find workers who will accept low wages for tough work. But how can policies and trade deals shape and continue to shape this unstoppable flow? When NAFTA took effect in 1994, it aimed to boost trade between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. In some ways, it succeeded. Industries grew, factories opened along the border, and certain sectors thrived. But it also brought unexpected hardships. As cheaper U.S. crops entered Mexican markets, many small farmers could not compete. Their incomes fell, and some lost their livelihoods entirely. This deepened rural poverty and pushed more people to look north for work. Instead of reducing migration by improving Mexico's economy, NAFTA, in certain areas, ended up doing the opposite, sending more people towards the U.S. in search of a better life. Over the years, the U.S. has tried various strategies to manage immigration. Some were wide-reaching, like the Immigration Reform and Control Act, IRCA, in 1986, which granted legal status to millions of undocumented immigrants already in the country. Others were more limited, like temporary guest worker programs or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, which gave certain undocumented young people a chance to stay without fear of immediate deportation. While these moves helped some groups, they never got to the heart of the problem, the ongoing economic forces and lack of stable opportunities that drove people to leave their homes in the first place. If a person wants to move legally to the U.S. for work, the paths are often narrow and hard to follow. There are quotas, long waits, strict requirements, and a limited number of visas. Many who try face red tape and years of uncertainty. Others, knowing that legal migration might never become a reality for them, feel they have no choice but to cross the border without documents. Employers, too, prefer a quick solution. If it is too hard to hire workers legally, they may look the other way when undocumented workers arrive, eager to fill jobs. This situation creates a system that encourages unauthorized migration, even if that is not what the laws intended. And this is one of the reasons the United States continues to struggle with its battle of illegal immigration. As of 2023, there were approximately 10.9 million Mexican-born immigrants in the United States. And as reported by Migration Policy, it is estimated that approximately 5.1 million, 45% of the 11.3 million unauthorized immigrants in the United States as of mid-2022 were from Mexico. We can draw a parallel with other parts of the world. In the Middle East, foreign powers once drew borders and made promises that did not match the region's realities. Those actions led to confusion and long-term conflicts, such as the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, which serves as a notable example of this historical miscalculation. In secret negotiations during World War I, Britain and France, with the assent of Russia, delineated borders for the Ottoman territories in the Middle East, dividing the region into zones of influence. This agreement was made without considering the diverse ethnic and religious groups inhabiting these areas, such as the Arabs, Kurds, and Assyrians, each with distinct identities, aspirations, and histories. Similarly, in North America, trade deals and immigration policies sometimes send conflicting signals. On one hand, the U.S. wants fewer undocumented migrants. On the other, its economic structures and limited legal channels seem to invite them. On one hand, the U.S. encourages free trade and cross-border business. On the other, it resists the human movement that naturally follows economic ties. Just as Middle Eastern borders drawn by outside forces created lasting tension, the rules set by U.S. policymakers, some intended to reduce migration, some to manage it, often fail to deal with the root causes. Instead, they create conditions for ongoing movement. When guest worker programs expire, people remain. When legal avenues prove too difficult, people find another way. When farmers lose their markets at home, they cross for better wages abroad. This patchwork of measures, each trying to fix one part of the problem, has never added up to a full solution. The newer trade agreement, the USMCA, replaced NAFTA in 2020, but it also does not promise a sudden end to the push and pull dynamics. Without addressing the core issues of rural poverty, wage gaps, and a lack of meaningful legal options for work, the cycle continues. The policies that shaped trade and migration, like those that once shaped other conflict-prone regions, such as sub-Saharan Africa, leave behind a legacy of mixed signals and partial fixes. This, in turn, guarantees that movement across the border remains ongoing, driven by conditions that law enforcement alone cannot resolve. The forces driving people toward the U.S.-Mexico border go beyond simple economics. Violence and danger also play a big role. In parts of Mexico and across Central America, especially in countries like Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, drug cartels and gangs hold tremendous power. They threaten and extort ordinary people, often leaving them with few choices. Faced with the risk of kidnapping, forced recruitment, or murder, they see migration as the only way out. Their journey north may be hard and uncertain, but staying can feel like a death sentence. Mexico, once mostly a country of people leaving for the U.S., has also become a place that migrants from other nations must cross. Its southern border now acts as a new barrier. Men, women, and children from Central America arrive there, hoping to pass through Mexico to reach the United States. To understand the numbers a little better, in May 2021, it was reported that over 180,000 Central American migrants arrived in Mexico, which was the highest number in 20 years. This creates a chain of migration, where Mexico must handle large numbers of people moving through its territory. Like refugee corridors around the world, Mexico becomes a stopover point, a place where people wait, bargain with smugglers, seek help from aid groups, or face detentions and deportations. Adding to these human-made crises is the growing impact of climate change, droughts that ruin crops, storms that tear through homes, and rising temperatures that make farming even harder force many rural families to leave. When climate disasters strip people of their livelihoods, migration becomes not just an option, but a necessity. The old cycle of economic hardship now comes with a new twist, changing weather that makes survival even more difficult. As a result, the border is not just a place where workers seek better wages. It is also a place where people run from violence, instability, and environmental collapse. Many arrive hoping to claim asylum, a form of protection offered under international law. They might have been threatened by gangs, targeted for their beliefs, or simply caught in the crossfire. The U.S.-Mexico border becomes a waiting room, where they must plead their case to officials who are often overwhelmed by the sheer number of arrivals. This is part of a global pattern. Just as conflicts in the Middle East have created waves of refugees who cross deserts, seas, and dangerous checkpoints to find safety, people fleeing Central American violence or climate disasters trek north in search of security. Borders, whether they are in the Middle East or North America, become choke points where desperate people gather, hoping for a chance at a stable life. And the sad reality is, none of this looks likely to end soon. As long as violence reigns, corruption thrives, climate crises deepen, and poverty coupled with weak governance cripples communities, migration will remain an inevitable reality. Walls, guards, and patrols may slow them down, but they simply cannot remove the reasons why they leave in the first place. The push factors have grown larger and more complex than ever. As of 2024, we're all aware of the ongoing fight. As measures have ramped up and high-tech barriers have been implemented, it poses the question, why does the United States seem no closer to shutting the door for good? Over the years, the United States has invested huge amounts of money and effort to secure its southern border, with studies suggesting that the cost is upwards of $400 billion. High fences, concrete walls, watchtowers, armed agents, cameras, drones, and motion sensors now line many parts of it. This constant push for more security was supposed to stop, or at least slow down the flow of migrants. In reality, it has not achieved that goal. Instead, it has forced people to take more dangerous routes, crossing through deserts and remote areas where the risk of dehydration, injury, and death is high. What was once a challenging journey, difficult but not always deadly, has now become far more perilous. These tougher barriers have led to some unexpected results. In the past, many Mexican workers crossed seasonally, working a few months in U.S. fields or factories, and then returning home. Today, because crossing has become so risky and expensive, many who do make it through decide to stay longer or even settle permanently. Once inside, they fear going back and forth, since another crossing might be too dangerous. This change means the undocumented population in the U.S. often grows more permanent, even as policies aim to push people away. The human cost of these enforcement strategies is hard to ignore. Families are frequently separated. Parents who crossed might not return home for years, and children left behind may grow up without seeing their mothers or fathers in person. Some migrants are detained in cramped facilities, sometimes for long periods, while their future remains uncertain. Others rely on smugglers who may take advantage of them, charge huge fees, or leave them stranded. Stories of death in the desert and tragic accidents along remote routes are too common, showing that greater enforcement does not eliminate the desire to move. It only raises the stakes. In 2023, the remains of 113 presumed migrants were found near the state's border with Mexico. Faced with each new wall or patrol method, people adapt. Smugglers find hidden trails, migrants travel in larger groups for safety, and entire networks spring up to guide them around checkpoints. This cycle of action and reaction mirrors what we see in regions torn by conflict. Governments build barriers to control territory, yet challengers find ways to cross them. The root problems remain, so the struggle never really ends. The U.S.-Mexico border, like those drawn in other troubled regions, is a line that people refuse to accept as the final word on their fate. No matter how advanced the technology or how strict the policies are, as long as the reasons for leaving home remain strong, people will keep coming. They will try new strategies, find new routes, or pay more to smugglers. Enforcement alone, without addressing deeper causes, ends up like an endless game of cat and mouse. Each new measure might shift the flow, but it doesn't stop it. In the meantime, the human stories of heartbreak, loss, risk, and hope play out day after day. The border becomes not just a fence, but a stage where courage and desperation meet, and where simple survival often outweighs the walls designed to keep people out. When it comes to immigration policy, the United States has struggled to find common ground for decades. Each time lawmakers try to pass a comprehensive reform bill, sharp political divisions stand in the way. Some demand tougher enforcement and fewer legal pathways, while others call for new systems that would offer legal status to those who have built lives in the U.S. As a result, meaningful reform efforts often stall before they can become law. This gridlock makes it hard to address the underlying problems that keep driving people across the border. Past attempts have brought mixed results. In the 1980s, the Immigration Reform and Control Act, IRCA, granted amnesty to millions of undocumented immigrants already in the country, aiming to solve the issue once and for all. But it did not stop future waves of migration. Programs like DACA later offered some temporary relief for young immigrants brought to the U.S. as children. Still, such measures did not prevent new arrivals. Without fixing the root causes of economic differences, limited legal channels, and conditions pushing people out of their homelands, these moves could only offer short-term help. Mexico, too, must balance its policies in response to U.S. pressure. When the U.S. demands stricter enforcement, Mexico often complies by cracking down on migrants from Central America. This can shift the problem rather than solve it. People who might have traveled north get stuck in Mexico or find new routes. The cycle continues, with both countries trying to manage migration flows without truly stopping them. In the end, the lack of lasting agreement leaves the border in a permanent state of tension. Each political shift in the U.S. brings a new approach. Some call for tougher rules and barriers, while others push for more humane policies and legal pathways. Yet, despite all of these changes, a stable and long-term solution remains out of reach. This back and forth ensures that the system remains chaotic and unpredictable. As a result, migrants keep coming, driven by the same forces that were never resolved. Instead of a tidy ending, the story continues with each new generation of politicians, each new policy, and each new migrant willing to take the chance. The line between the U.S. and Mexico remains a stage for these debates unsettled, ongoing, and deeply tied to the issues that no side has fully addressed. All around the world, we find examples of borders drawn with little regard for the people who live near them. One of the most famous cases is in the Middle East, where foreign powers once divided the region into separate states without considering local histories, cultures, and ties. For example, the Sykes-Picot Agreement carved up former Ottoman lands and split communities that had coexisted for centuries. Kurds, Arabs, and religious groups found themselves placed into new, artificial states, sparking conflicts that have lasted for generations. Many remain trapped in violence and forced migration. At the U.S.-Mexico border, the reasons may look different, often centered on wages, jobs, and economic opportunity rather than religious or ethnic divides, but the pattern is much the same. When boundaries ignore the realities on the ground, people continue to move no matter what barriers are built. They seek safety, family, better pay, or basic dignity. In the Middle East, some fight over oil or water. Here, people cross in the hope of a fair wage and a decent home. Yet, in both places, the result is ongoing displacement and uncertainty. This reveals a universal lesson. Borders that do not reflect human needs, cultural connections, and economic ties become pressure points, not peaceful lines. They do not stop human movement. They simply redirect it. They may create new problems, make journeys harder, or cause resentment, but they rarely end the flow of people. Just as we have seen in the Middle East, attempts to control or manage these imposed borders often fail to bring lasting peace or stability. Instead, they produce cycles of adaptation, struggle, and change. The lesson is clear. Unless the deeper reasons behind human movement are addressed, whether those reasons are war, poverty, or lack of opportunity, the migration will continue. Borders drawn without understanding human lives never truly settle. They remain active fault lines in the global landscape. Finally, we turn to the future and ask, can anything truly change? Or will this cycle continue indefinitely? Looking ahead, it's clear that fences, patrols, and stricter laws alone will not end the constant flow of people across the U.S.-Mexico border. To make a real difference, deeper problems must be addressed. The grinding poverty in some Mexican regions, the lack of stable job opportunities, the violence that scares families out of their hometowns, and the growing side effects of climate change on farming and daily life. If these root causes remain in place, no amount of border security will stop people from trying to find a better future elsewhere. Just as old disputes continue to shape other parts of the world, the U.S.-Mexico border will stay busy. Each generation of migrants will respond to the same forces: economic need, fear, hope, and family ties. Until something changes in the underlying conditions, the story of migration along this frontier will keep unfolding. The line on the map, first drawn so long ago, now stands as a reminder that as long as these pressures push and pull, people will keep crossing, year after year, seeking the life that remains out of reach on their side of the divide. What about the number of illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border every year for the last 20 years?